Let's take a few moments to think about organisations. The organisation level where strengths ways of working is happening or maybe not happening. And this takes me back to the Gallup organisation and thinking about their research. Some of the many messages that have emerged are captured in the next few slides. Here they identified where organisations fail. And there are two flawed assumptions that they found in an awful lot of organisations that really are not using a strengths approach. Firstly, that each person can learn to be competent in almost anything they do. There's a fabulous example of that within UK mental health services. As much as I believe in care coordination, because as a case manager working with people with acquired brain injury, I coordinate complex packages of care, and it's a very skilled approach. It's an area of work I love. But there's a danger that's been seen over the years, particularly within UK mental health services, where ultimately everybody becomes a care coordinator. Everybody does the basic, mediocre, same approach to their work. Or at least this is the way it's widely perceived. And to a greater extent, I would say this is the way it's experienced as well. Within those organisations, thinking more broadly about the Gallup research now, they also fall into this other flaw that each person's greatest room for growth is in their greatest area of weakness. We find what you're no good at, and we send you off on some training where you find that you're no good, and we focus a lot of resources trying to lift you from being rubbish to being somewhere near mediocre. On the flip side, what the Gallup organisation found is that strengths-based organisations make the opposite two assumptions consistently. What emerged is that each person's talents are seen as unique and enduring in these more strengths-focused organisations. Again, it's not that everybody's going to end up being the same and competent to do anything. No, it's really trying to focus in on each and everyone's individual and unique talents. And then the other assumption is that the greatest room for growth or of growth is in the areas of greatest strength. So identify what people are good at, focus resources on that, because you already have high levels of motivation. And the idea is that we can teach people to go from good to being excellent. And that's got quite a strong attraction to it. And that, again, is what the Gallup organisation have found consistently comes out of all of those very successful organisations. They really do not ignore problems and weaknesses, but they put the very minimum of resources into those, at least to stop them bringing down the other achievements. But then focus much more attention and resources into what people are already good at, that they want to develop further for themselves. Those unique, enduring elements, which gets the most for them as individuals, but it also gets the most out of them for the organisation as well. It's a classic win-win situation. Staying with the Gallup organisation and the great managers, having interviewed millions of them, there are consistent messages that again emerged through their literature. The great managers are careful to look for talent in every role. So going back to those earlier assumptions on the previous slide, everybody has unique talents. The great manager knows that and looks for those in each individual. Focus people's performance on outcomes rather than over-prescribing the process. Give people a sense of where you want them to be, where you want them to be going to, and then back off. Don't focus on micromanaging them. If you've identified the talents and put them into the right place, it should be further down the slide but it's important here, then that will let people flourish. They will find their way to those outcomes. So the manager's job is to give them enough confidence and motivation to help them to find their own way to those outcomes, to be creative, to be flexible. The great managers treat each employee differently. They focus on their strengths. So it's not about seeing that everybody has been equally competent to do just about everything. Each person is responded to differently. So if we look at the idea of supervision, or the outcome of appraisal should not be that everybody gets the same form and everybody is ticked in the same way. It's nothing to do with completing forms. It's that everybody gets their own unique approach that connects with their unique individuality. Great managers spend most of the time with their best people. They don't spend all of that time with the weakest link. Evidence shows time is best used when it is focused with the best people, motivating them so that their greatness emerges, and in itself, that inspires others around them. Some people lift their own performance by what they see happening from others around them. Basically, success can become contagious. I emphasize what I said earlier. Weaknesses should not be thought of as the bottom level of the deck of cards, which, if we ignore them entirely, a point will come where the whole deck collapses. But we also do not want to focus all of our attention just on these things that went wrong or could go wrong, on our weaker people. The priority is to be aware of the weaknesses, provide support that's needed to shore them up, but we need to look at our unique people and find the right fit for them as individuals. If we're thinking of them individually, thinking of them as people of unique talent, the question is, how do we then best maximize that talent within the overall framework of what the organization and the job is about? What do the great managers know? We've looked at what they do, but what do they know? They know that people don't change that much. That's an important message. So I could spend all this time in the world throwing resources at people, but the great managers know not to waste a lot of resources trying to just take off those rough edges. That's not going to result in massive amounts of change. And as it says on the second point, don't waste time trying to put in what was left out. Try to draw out what was left in. So again, the message is focused on the strengths, develop those. Don't look for the weaknesses and try to fill holes that we don't even have enough resource material to fill. The greatest indicator of success is when a person can answer yes to a range of questions that they identified in their research. And you can find these in a PDF document in the resources in this module, one entitled Strengths in the Workplace. The most important question from their research is, if any of us can say that at work, do I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day? If I can answer yes to that, that's the greatest indicator of success for me as a person developing my strengths and ultimately for the team and then on for the organization. So that's an important question to always focus on at work. Do I or do we have the opportunities to do what I or we do best every day? It assumes we know what we do best. So that comes back to discovering those natural talents, then focusing on those, draw those out, help people to really work on those and use those every day. Another message from the Gallup research is, if you're not working to your strengths, you are 6 times less likely to be engaged in your job or actively enjoying your job. There is a very recent Gallup publication that captures many of the messages I'm putting across. It picks up on the previous presentation as well as some of the messages in this one. This brings me to another strengths quote. In this case, Tom Rath, who's an author working within the Gallup organisation. Strengths Finder 2 is a publication of his that particularly comes to mind. Tom reminds us that if you spend your life trying to be good at everything, you'll never be great at anything. There is something about the mediocre, being good at everything, that's not as satisfying as knowing, feeling, experiencing, delivering something great, something that's focused. But it does take a shift of thinking. A message I hope is coming through in this presentation as well as previous ones. A problems approach assumes that each person's greatest room for growth is in their greatest area for weakness, whereas a strengths approach assumes each person's greatest room for growth is in their areas of greatest strength. It's important to repeat that message. We need to shift that thinking. It's not a training issue. You can throw training at people. We can raise awareness. But are we really getting the most out of people? We need to access the appropriate tools and the development that offers support. Practice development, that's been the most important mantra for me. That is where I've seen the greatest amount of change in people and teams that I've worked with. That's where it's really brought about an impact for teams and a change in those teams. Reflect back on the messages in this presentation. How does your organisation, your management, measure up to the significant Gallup research findings? How do you match up to the questions in that PDF document, Strengths in the Workplace? And then reflect for yourself and with colleagues, what can you do? What can your colleagues try to do to develop some of these messages within your practice?